Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. And Quinn Hughes has been traded to the Minnesota Wild. And that's going to be our topic for today, breaking down the good and the bad for this trade for both the Minnesota Wild and the Vancouver Canucks. Because I think we both know that this came out of left field. No one was thinking it was going to be this side. We all thought maybe Carolina, New Jersey, Philly, even Washington was poking around in there like many other teams should. But the Minnesota Wild and Bill Guerin, wow, just absolutely crazy. So we're going to talk about that. But before we do that, make sure you like, subscribe, ring that bell, and comment, because I want to know who you think won this trade. Was it the Wild or was it the Canucks? And really just your thoughts as a whole. Do you think he's going to extend to Minnesota? Is he going to go play with his brothers after his contract's done? I want to hear what you have to say. But enough of this talk. Let's get right into the video. So like I said, Quinn Hughes gets dealt to the Minnesota Wild in exchange for Marco Rossi, Liam Holmgren, Zeev Buium, and a 2026 first round pick. Absolutely crazy. And it's crazy for a couple of reasons here. For the one, I was sitting on my couch eating a salad, and I thought I was getting punked on my Twitter when I saw Elliot Friedman say Quinn Hughes is going to Minnesota. For the reason of, one, Minnesota was never talked about. We were all thinking, okay, the Flyers, the Hurricanes, Washington apparently had a decent package of Hudson, McMichael, 2 firsts, and another prospect. And then, of course, the New Jersey Devils apparently didn't give that great or as good of what Minnesota gave. It just wasn't expected. So I had to do my due diligence. I put a video on my Instagram story saying I think it's going to be, a Marco Rossi, maybe Buium, a first and a prospect. Ended up being that. I was very surprised because I'm never that right. But yeah, let's go over first the Vancouver side, how it benefits them, what the bad is for them, and then of course go to the Minnesota side and what the good and the bad is for them as well. So thanks to Daily Faceoff, who already has these lines all done together. And as we see, Marco Rossi, Liam Holmgren, and Zeev Buium are already inputted in here. So let's start off with Marco Rossi, a guy that I will really always defend, a 5'9", very undersized center that Minnesota did not like the idea of, but has seen good progression over his time, to start at least, in the NHL. His first season, 40 points, followed that up with 60, and then 13 and 17 to start this year. Now, I know a lot of people might be looking at this and saying, okay, well, he had a lot of this point production and uptick in points because he was playing with one of the better winger duos for the most part in Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Boldy. Now, while that might be, Marco Rossi is a very skilled forward. And yeah, maybe Bill Guerin didn't like the size that he had on him in terms of his height and maybe even weight. But when you talk about a 2C that can bring some just youthfulness into this top six and does have a lot of skill, yeah, I look at Marco Rossi, and whatever Bill Guerin has to say about that, I really don't care. Now, is he going to be playing with Brock Besser and Connor Garland this whole season? Probably not. He's going to be on that second line with possibly Evander Kane. I would hope Jake DeBrusk. And I guess we'll see if it's Kiefer Sherwood or not, depending on if he gets dealt. But yeah, Marco Rossi is a very interesting player, maybe even polarizing for some, because yeah, you do need size sometimes, but he's been able to get away with that and be pretty productive doing it. So when I see a guy in Marco Rossi, he checks all the boxes for the Vancouver Canucks. And yeah, again, might be undersized, but they needed a young 2C, which is exactly what they were looking for, and not what they got in a guy in Philip Hedl, who has just been, again, what his whole career has been, unfortunately, which is just a bunch of injuries. Now, you'll see farther down in this bottom six, a guy in Liam Holmgren, a number 19 overall pick in the first round in 2022. Hasn't been that lucky this year. 0 points in 18 games. And I know what you are all thinking. It's, what, is he a throw-in? Like, what is this all about? No, a 21-year-old who is still finding his way in the NHL is not a throw-in. He is uber talented and just needs some time. And I think in a better system where he's given more minutes, like Vancouver, who doesn't really exactly have, that much upward talent, he's going to be that guy. 37 points in 41 games last season while splitting some time with the Minnesota Wild on an Iowa team that was pretty terrible. So he was almost a point per game while going up and down between the NHL level. Now, again, 5 points in 24 games last season, not as productive as you would hope. But again, this is some time that you have to take. He wasn't really being given all these minutes that well. And a guy in Liam Holmgren who, he has a lot of offensive talent, maybe not be that defensive guy that you're always looking for. But if you're the Vancouver Canucks, you're trying to maybe make some safe bets and maybe make some bets that are a little bit more risky. And I think that's what you're getting with Liam Holmgren, because yeah, he hasn't panned out so far in his very young NHL career. Like I mentioned, a Canucks lineup that doesn't really have much up the right side, like other than Connor Garland, he's going to be getting some time. And if you're going to be playing him less than Kiefer Sherwood, who although has been good to start, but has definitely tapered off as things have went on here lately, you're crazy. And I think you got to do that if you're Vancouver, because it's pretty clear they're going into some type of rebuild, retool, like hopefully for them a rebuild. But one guy that will probably speed this up a lot and is a massive piece to this lineup alongside a guy in Marco Rossi, who fills in spots they were looking for, is Zeev Buium. Yes, the 2024 12th overall pick. He has 14 points in 31 games this season. Not absolutely tearing it up like a Matthew Schaefer, but has still been very good. Extremely talented offensively, can walk a line, and yeah, a lot of raw skills when it comes to a guy in Zeev Buium. And I don't think that's a bad thing if you're the Vancouver Canucks, especially considering that you're trying to replace a guy in Quinn Hughes who is Zeev Buium. And is he going to be able to fully replace him? Probably not. But that's just the situation you're in, because that's the bad part about this situation with the Vancouver Canucks is, yeah, this is a pretty good trade, one that I graded as an A, and I think that Vancouver came out on top of, especially with no extension on the other side. We'll get into that. But yeah, the bad is that you lose a franchise defenseman who is extremely good, arguably one of the top one or two top defensemen in the NHL, and is just so good. He's a leader, and of course was your captain for a while here in Vancouver. But Zeev Buium is going to be able to step into a role where he can produce offensively and get a ton of minutes for this Vancouver Canucks team. He's projected to be that one guy on probably the first power play, as he is and as he should be, and on that first pairing with Filip Hronek, who could hopefully help the kid just ease into things and take away some of that hard pressure that you're probably going to get against those first lines and big matchups. Now, a guy in Zeev Buium isn't going to absolutely wow you defensively, and nor was Hughes really. Like, he was fine. He was pretty good defensively, but he wasn't that crazy Jacob Slavin guy that I think we're all going to be expecting of this offensive defenseman. No. Zeev Buium is very good offensively. That's what he's going to give you, and that's what he's going to try to replace in a guy in Quinn Hughes who has done that so well over his time and tenure in Vancouver. So again, you go through all three of these guys, Marco Rossi, Liam Holmgren, Zeev Buium, and of course that 2026 first-round pick that will likely be between, let's just say, 22 to 29. I don't know if they make it to the Stanley Cup final. We'll get into why for the Minnesota Wild. But yeah, not a bad first-round pick considering how deep the next year draft is in 2026. So I like that for the Vancouver Canucks, and even with their own first-round pick, who knows where they're going to get, right? So I think it's an exciting time. I think that they came out ahead. I think that they obviously tackled one problem in a young center that they wanted. Two, they replaced Quinn Hughes with some type of offensive puck mover in Zeev Buium, and very young at 20 years old. And then, yeah, you take a little bit of a risk in Liam Holmgren, who even then, I don't know if I would say risk yet, only because he still has so much talent and still needs time to develop and be put in those situations where I think in Vancouver he'll be able to do that. So yeah, like I said, I think that this is an A grade for Vancouver. I really like it, and I don't mind it at all. Now, when we go to the Minnesota Wild, who it's extremely exciting there right now. Before Quinn Hughes even comes, they have arguably the best goalie duo right now in Filip Gustafsson and Jesper Wallstedt. Of course, you still have Kirill Kaprizov, Matt Boldy, Brock Faber, Joel Eriksson-Ek. Just a lot to like, but not much depth. And that's where we will get into it here with the Minnesota Wild. Like I mentioned, the big names here, there is some things to like in Minnesota and other things to not. But let's just look at that D-core right now. Quinn Hughes slots in on that left side and easily fits in. That is going to be a disgusting pair of Brock Faber and Quinn Hughes. I mean, you talk about one guy focusing whole offensively, and that two-way guy in Brock Faber is going to complement him so well. Now, you might be looking at this defense and saying, what am I looking at? Why is it so terrible? Well, they are missing a couple of guys, and pretty decently big names if you don't know them, in Jacob Middleton and Jonas Brodin. Definitely some two big, gritty shutdown guys who will step in. I assume that Brodin will be that second pair guy, as well as Middleton go in on that third pair with Zach Bogosian. A pretty solid defense core, one that's filled with a lot of offense, a lot of defense, very versatile, and that's just a Bill Guerin defense. I mean, how can it not be? Now, we'll go back down to these injuries just for a second, just to give perspective as to what I'm going to get into here very quickly before I say how good this is going to be for Minnesota. We'll get into the bad. They're missing, some decent depth pieces in Marcus Foligno, Vinny Hinostroza, Matt Zuccarello, who always slots in and is always so consistent in that top six. But even with that, the Minnesota Wild have always struggled with forward depth. And, you give away Liam Holmgren, who, to be fair, hasn't been that good and, hasn't been able to transition well in the NHL, but Marco Rossi, who I think's done pretty well, and of course he'd be on the back end. But the offensive depth has always been a problem for Minnesota. And I think that's one spot where they're going to have to improve, and I think they will try to do that. But, I mean, Urov is one guy who they put a bunch of faith in, and he's looked pretty decent this year. Joel Exernek has always been pretty solid, and then you follow that up with Ryan Hartman and Nico Sturm. It's the depth that's going to suffer for the Minnesota Wild. And one thing where, you say, yeah, okay, maybe, but you get Quinn Hughes. Yes, okay, of course, you get a ultimate puck mover who's so good offensively. Just wait for a second. I'm going to get to that. But this offense it's the depth is where it makes me cringe, and you really do have to improve that. It's been a problem for years now, and how you're going to improve that in such a tough trade market right now, I don't know. That's not my job. Bill Guerin has to do that. But there are going to be teams who are going to start to sell. St. Louis has been one of those who's talked about it. I doubt that they try to trade with Minnesota unless it's a pretty good deal. Where I'm strong. But yeah, that's my one problem here. That's kind of like the bad for the Minnesota Wild, I guess. But let's get into the good. And then I guess a little bit more bad, but that could change with this move. Quinn Hughes, of course, is going to change this whole scheme for the Minnesota Wild. He's just so good that way that the offense is going to change, the defense is going to change, the power play is going to change. He's going to be your QB1 pretty much everywhere. The guy handling the puck through the neutral zone into the offensive zone, creating plays, walking that line, and being an absolute force and a presence, opening up space for other guys like, maybe Matt Boldy or Kirill Kaprizov. It is going to be so interesting how that's going to break down and kind of pan out for the Minnesota Wild. Now, look, Quinn Hughes is not signed, and I guess this is a little bit of the bad too, so I'm kind of going everywhere, but he is not signed, or there is no indication that he has not signed through this time. And I guess that is a little bit scary for Bill Guerin, but he made this trade knowing that. So when you look at this, you have him for this season, a playoff run, hopefully, and then next season, again, a playoff run, hopefully. This Minnesota Wild team has not had a lot of, I guess, good faith with the playoffs, and I'm going to pull up here and how it looks. The Minnesota Wild, various playoff appearance droughts. This is from BR Open Ice. Shout out them. Second round, 10 seasons. They haven't been to the second round in 10 seasons. Conference finals, 22 seasons. Yikes. And then, of course, we all know this one. The Cup final, they have never been once. Now, when you add a guy as crazy good as Quinn Hughes, who can produce offensively and really break through for teams, and it does have that playoff experience to kind of show up, yeah, this could change it. And with a fully healthy lineup, I could see it happening. But again, we talk about that forward depth. We talk about how much that is going to impact everything. I think that's a problem. Now, getting back to Quinn Hughes here, how much he changes this Minnesota Wild lineup, playing heavy minutes. This season, in 26 games played, he was almost averaging 28 minutes a game, 27, 26, if you can see that there on the screen. He's been absolutely crazy. And now, the point production hasn't been out of this world, 23 points in 26 games. There's been a lot going on. It's Vancouver. We all know what's been going on. But for the Vancouver Canucks, it seemed like this whole trade was kind of getting to them and making things difficult. And that should not be surprising considering how everything was, rumors getting out, and even one of the coaches admitting that, yeah, it was hurting morale and kind of affecting the team as a whole. So it's not totally surprising that this trade happened so quickly. But the impact that he can give to this Minnesota Wild team, you add, even though the last season, 76 points in 68 games, 92 and 82, 76 and 78, from just a defenseman alone is absolutely disgusting. And yeah, when we look at this Minnesota Wild lineup, is there problems that I've talked about here? Yeah, of course there is. But for the most part, I do like this deal. Would I like to see an extension? Would that make it better for my grade? I gave now the grade that I gave for the Minnesota Wild in this one is a pretty big, why is it that, right? Like, you get a guy in Quinn Hughes, he's so good. Wouldn't you want it to be? And I'm looking at my phone right now because I want to make sure that I give the right grade. It's kind of a little nifty. A B. I gave him a B because the Minnesota Wild, again, Bill Guerin went into this with no extension in mind. If he walks after 2 seasons, yeah, I mean, you kind of have to make that move if you're so desperate to have this success. I don't know. I mean, I like it. I don't overly like it, but it's a good move. I think that if you're going to go in for somebody who's as good as Quinn Hughes, and maybe you can get an extension done. Maybe you can't. It can only happen on July 1st. But keep in mind, they're the only team that now can offer him an 8-year deal before that new thing kicks in, where the 7 years is the longest, and the 6th for the teams in free agency. That starts on, I believe, September 15th. So yeah, keep that in mind when it comes to deals like this, and how it could affect Quinn Hughes' thought process, I guess. Now, do I think he probably signs short-term if he stays in Minnesota? Yeah, maybe. I mean, he does say he wants to play with his brothers. But yeah, this is the good and the bad from the Minnesota side. And I don't really think it's too crazy to say that, both sides kind of won, but there are some bad aspects when it comes to something like this. Vancouver has less of those than what Minnesota kind of took on. But yeah, this is, again, Quinn Hughes, Marco Rossi, Liam Holmgren, Zebuyam, and a first. That's the trade. Let me know what you think about all this, because it truly has been a crazy time, like absolutely crazy over this past couple of hours. So I'm glad I'm getting this video done the night of and getting it to you the next day. But like always, like, subscribe, hit that bell, and comment. Again, who do you think won this trade? Was it Vancouver? Was it Minnesota? Do you think it was pretty even? I want to know what you think, because honestly, you might be disagreeing with everything I say, maybe agreeing, or maybe half agreeing on everything I say. I don't know, but that's why I want to hear from you. But again, till next time, we'll talk Monday for Dump and Chase, next Friday for everything else. Yes, I was sick, which is why I didn't release anything today. But until then, my name is Zach Staten. I appreciate you listening, and we'll talk soon.